And 75% of those resumes are being kicked out before they're ever seen by a human being. So if you don't have strong keywords in your written branding materials that are associated with the field and the position you're looking for, you're likely not going to be seen by anyone to even have that potential conversation around a position. Because unless you have a really clear sense about who you are and who you aren't, and you understand how to communicate that in a way that is memorable to other individuals, you can't go anywhere.
Hey there, this is David Mariano, and welcome to episode 069 of Finance Career Launch, the show that helps you own your career. This podcast and the rest of your Finance Career Launch membership provides the training and support to help you develop, contribute, and advance. And if you're not yet a member, go ahead and register for no charge by visiting financecareerlaunch.com and clicking that big blue button. When you do that, you'll get instant access to things like the video series, the 7 pillars of a successful career in finance, along with some other really great stuff. So this week, whether you are thinking about advancing your career or you want to make a career change, your career brand will often determine your success. What's the condition of your career brand? Your career brand, rather. Is it compelling enough so that the right people will remember you? Is it memorable? Now, I have to admit, when I think about it, I still struggle with the concept of self-promotion, especially when that's the term that people use to describe marketing and getting yourself out there and networking. I don't want to be seen as pushy, arrogant, or unlikable. I want people to like me. I don't want to push people away for any reason. But I also know that if I want to advance my career, I need to be memorable. And that's a lesson that took me a long time to realize. But my career brand, your career brand, should articulate exactly why your colleagues and or your clients should want to be around you and should need you around. So my conversation today is with a friend of mine, Kris McGuigan. She is a certified resume writer, career coach, and a speaker. As a founder and owner of Professional Courage, Kris helps mid-level professionals position themselves for success in the job market. She provides the tools and support needed to take your career to the next level. So this is a great conversation about career branding. It relates to the conversation a few weeks ago with Ryan Roten about your personal online brand, but that one was really focused on what you do online once you know what your personal brand is. Today's conversation, Kris and I dig into how to actually figure out what your brand is. So it's really the precursor to what you do online and what you communicate to people. And we talk about how to figure that out. Also, stick around to the end because Kris has a webinar coming up focused on young professionals and resume writing and some other things on July 6th. She mentions a special link at the end where you can go and sign up for that. So listen to the end and she'll tell you how to get more information about that webinar. Please enjoy this conversation with Kris McGuigan. All right, Kris, great to have you on the show today. I'd love to start with just asking you, how do you describe what you do to other people?
It's a great question. So, Dave, I'm a certified career management coach and one of only 3 Academy certified resume writers in the state of Ohio. So I create and deliver career marketing tools that get results, work primarily with emerging leaders, and position them for success in the job market by giving the tools and promoting the mindset to take their careers to the next level.
That's great. Well, tell us the story of how you decided to do that, how you decided to set out on your own and what got you there.
Well, Dave, I spent about 15 years in the corporate world climbing the ladder, if you will, and did quite a bit in healthcare, nonprofit arenas, moved into healthcare administration, and was doing quite a bit on the business side. Really enjoyed the work that I was doing, and I think that I was very good at it, but it wasn't touching my soul the way I was looking for it. It wasn't what I felt my true potential was. And so about a year ago, I started looking around and saying, what space do I really want to be in? And I had spent over a decade talking with people about their resumes and professional development and decisions they could make in their career to kind of network, improve networking and continue to move up the ladder as I did. And I found that that was what I loved the most and pulled the most energy from. So when it was time to say, you know what, I think I'm just going to go out on my own and see if I can, make it or break it. And so I walked away from my job and decided to start my company and go all in, and have been doing that for a little over 12 months now, and it's been an incredible experience.
That's great. I'm glad that you worked in the all in, being Clevelanders here. So
Yes, absolutely.
Good. Well, as you know, we wanted to kind of dig into career branding today. There, a lot of people that listen to the show are looking for ways to either advance their career or make a change. And I know that's something that you've worked a lot on, and you've worked a lot on career branding for yourself, and you help other people do that. Well, let's lay the foundation for your perspective on career branding and why that's important.
So I always start with my clients, whether they be resume writers, coming for a resume, or perhaps going into, promotion coaching and stepping down the ladder on the executive level. It's really around starting with the end in mind, right? So Stephen Covey, you've got to start somewhere, and that starting place is frequently your brand, because unless you have a really clear sense about who you are and who you aren't, and you understand how to communicate that in a way that is memorable to other individuals, you can't go anywhere. So I can't write, for example, an effective resume for a jack of all trades, because that resume isn't going to get very far. Individuals aren't looking for someone who can do everything pretty okay. They want someone who can do their specific task very, very well. And so even if, again, an individual is coming to me for networking support, or they want to improve their LinkedIn profile, we always start in that place of, okay, I've got to know what's unique about you, what's authentic about you, what is the value that you bring to an organization or to your own customers, clients, et cetera, that we can start as a baseline for all of those branding materials, whether they be written or verbal.
And what are the people, I feel like, start with the tools? Let's go back, and how do you discover those things about yourself? Or I guess, are they discovered, or is your brand discovered by who you
Absolutely.
are, or is it built? How do you look at that?
I think that your brand is discovered, and I think that your value, your ROI, what's meaningful and authentic to you, is discovered. And then you build that by creating the right documentation, again, whether they be a marketing tool like a resume, or in the elevator pitch that you give. That's how you start to build that brand and expand it and help it become, broader. But figuring out what that is, discovering that, really starts with just from a very authentic place.
And how do you help people? Do you help people discover that brand, or do they? Is that some work that they have to do on their own?
I help them discover that. So we go through a process of sort of building blocks, if you will, and it's very organic questions. So it's stepping through things like, what do people admire and love most about you? So I think with all things career, it becomes kind of daunting and overwhelming to people when you start to look at how it is that I should self promote and how I should figure out what I'm good at, right? That seems overwhelming. But people don't realize that that information is sort of locked down inside of you. And it's just a matter of reframing the question. So when I say to someone, tell me what your bottom line value is, they struggle to come up with that answer. But when I start to talk about, okay, what do people admire about you? What do individuals ask you for advice on? What's the reputation you're most proud of? When you start to get to those questions and ask them to think about it differently and come at it from another angle, all that information starts to flow forward. Well, I'm really resilient, and people think that I'm very insightful, or I'm cool under pressure, and they consider me both a strategist as well as a turnaround artist. People start coming up with really descriptive language. So again, it was there all the time. It was just a matter of having it come out by asking the brain a different question that it wasn't as threatened by than tell me what your brand is.
I mean, what do people do next with that information? Where do you recommend that they go build a LinkedIn profile, or what? How do you take that answers to those they're personal questions? They reveal some things, but they also can seem kind of broad, right? If you say I'm insightful, like how do you then connect that to the goal that people want to accomplish in their career?
Right. So I'm a big proponent of taking things just one step at a time, breaking them down into bite-sized pieces, if you will. So we take those building blocks, which are truly just a series of adjectives and nouns and verbs that they've come up with about what it is they do and how they do it well. And again, those sort of descriptors of their life and who they are. And then we start to work those pieces into common sentence structure. So you might put something together saying that, as a project manager, my detailed approach and big picture thinking helps to drive strategic initiatives. Great. So we literally start to work to take just these little pieces and put them into sentences, combine the words to what makes the most sense for you until you find a statement. And often it's just a brainstorming process that really resonates with you. And then once you have this sentence, this sort of positioning statement, then we start to break that out into what you referenced in terms of having some broader documentation. So for example, I might take a positioning statement like the one I just mentioned, and then we might decide to shorten that and give it a little more jazz to become your tagline, your headline on LinkedIn. So maybe now you're the, project manager with infallible follow through or something such as that. So we create some taglines, create some other verbiage. You might expand on the other side, expand your positioning statement to now give me 3 clear points about how it is that you do that, some results experienced in your in your prior career or in your prior work experience that really demonstrates the position you've just stated, the brand you've just stepped forward with. And then it's these type of sentences and materials that we start to build into the resume or your LinkedIn profile, making sure that everything is supportive of that overall brand that you've created.
And so you mentioned something right at the beginning of that called a positioning statement. So you recommend that we all kind of think through how, this one sentence of what makes us special effectively.
Yes, absolutely. So, my term positioning statement is what they typically call an elevator speech. I could talk for quite some time and take up your entire podcast around why I don't think elevator pitch is the right term.
Sure.
So I term it a positioning statement, but it's essentially if you are asked to introduce yourself in a room full of people, what 1 or 2 sentences are you going to say so that it makes it very clear and compelling to the audience what it is that you do and the value that you bring? And so that positioning statement is what we compile with the building blocks that we talked about by kind of just talking through and brainstorming all of the different words that you are associated with. And from there, everything else stems.
When you talk to people about this, do they ever feel like it feels weird to say that stuff about myself? It feels weird to really envision using this positioning statement at a networking event with people.
Yes. And my common response to that is, okay, well, tell me how. I'm going to ask you the question. Tell me a little bit about yourself. What is it that you do, Dave? And the response, people are, number one, typically caught off guard because what's incredibly ironic about the very commonly referenced branding tactic of an elevator pitch is that it's ambiguous and most people can't pull it off, right? It's a question we have to answer every single day, frequently multiple times a day, and very few people are able to answer that question confidently and concisely and let it roll off their tongues.
Yeah.
So when individuals kind of step back and say, I'm not sure that I can, make this bold statement or it sounds kind of contrived and prepared. I said, yes, that's the point, because I would expect that if you are a professional who's out there making new contacts to either grow your business or potentially position yourself for a new job, that you have confidence and that you have prepared to communicate to people what it is that you do well.
Yeah, it's so critical to be able to do that in a concise way and
Yes.
be able to pull that off. So
And some of that is practice, Dave. So if individuals are uncomfortable just because it doesn't, they're not used to using that language or speaking so boldly about themselves, then it's a matter of, okay, so let's practice back and forth. Say it to me a few times. And sometimes in doing so, when they hear it out loud, there's a word that they decide to replace or something about it they start to change. But you can always I can hear in their voice when something changes, or I can physically see their shoulders go back and they sit up a little bit taller when they land on the right statement because they start coming across and get excited to say it out loud and to practice as opposed to feeling a little bit timid about it.
great, great. That's a great spot to start. So we're at the positioning statement now. What you started going down the path of the resume a little bit. So there's ways to kind of you use examples, I guess, to support this statement. What are the ways to how should people tackle this project of getting their career brand established in different ways?
Once you have your positioning statement,
Right.
okay. So, I think a great idea, especially if you're moving down the resume path, is definitely to start to now come up with, two or three examples, main points that really demonstrate how it is that you came up with this brand, right? Essentially, so that you came up with it because it's authentic and it's something that your boss may have said, or that an individual has complimented you for in the past. But now it's time to put your money where the mouth is, and figure out the right examples from your history, the right accomplishments to highlight underneath that, if you will. And that can be a great starting place for a resume. So, for example, if I'm that project manager with big picture thinking and a detailed approach, I'm going to choose, my top three accomplishments that I've moved forward in project management that really demonstrate the use of those skills and how it created bottom line value for my company. And that's not at this stage in the game. They don't need to be very properly worded or put together a really nice resume sentence. It's just come up with three examples. Let's talk about how this branding position has played out in your life, in your career. What kind of value has it brought to your employer or to your team? So people start to come up with some examples. We choose the best of those. And then that's the information that really starts to frame the executive summary section of your resume.
And so you do a few different things for people with resumes and coaching. I mean, I love how you kind of start from the beginning, and so in your work, it seems like you kind of start from scratch.
Yes.
And is that the best way to think about this? You may have a resume already, you may have a LinkedIn profile, you may have other things written about you already, but it's really best to start from scratch in this case.
I believe it is. And from the perspective of it's rare that individuals' existing materials carry the level of focus that is necessary to really be successful to market yourself on paper. And so by that, I mean, there is often some great verbiage and very frequently really strong accomplishments on their existing resume. But very rarely do I find a client who I can pick up their resume and within 6 seconds, I know what position they're trying to go for. And that's not always, I don't mean, I want to be a nursing administrator for Cleveland Clinic, but I should be able to tell that you want to be a nursing administrator when I pick up your resume. I should know that right out the gate, the type of position that you're going for, because your brand should be that clear to me. And so while that information, the supplemental materials I would call that you already have is going to come into play when we get a little further down the road, that starting block of saying, okay, what is it that you what is your goal, right? Starting with the end in mind. What is your goal? What are you trying to get to? And talk to me about the brand that positions you to get there. What are you great at? And then let's make those connections, create that target focused resume, baseline of where it is you're trying to go, and then be able to pull in some of that material that you may have already had to add to what you've already started.
And how often do you recommend people relook at their positioning statement, their examples, this kind of assembly of accomplishments and examples?
Well, I think that if you are on the job market, it's something that you're tweaking all along. Did you go to a networking meeting and an individual misunderstood what you did? Then you probably want to, tweak your positioning statement. If you suddenly found in your job search after some informational interviews that you're interested in a slightly different position than you were standing for, then that's something you want to continue. It's sort of in motion. It's definitely fluid. If you are an established professional who is really just looking to constantly be improving your game, right? Just upping your game, then I think it's something that you just want to take a look at every 6 months, 12 months. I'm an advocate for my clients. Every 12 months, you should be updating your resume. You always want to be ready for the unexpected, both positive and negative. And so I think positioning statement would fall in line with that. Make sure that that you're improving and updating and making it current and relevant to what's going on in your life at that time.
Great. How do you and so you have some written materials, you have kind of the wording down. What are some situations where you use this information, where you use this statement, where you use your examples to really establish the brand itself? So you have written words, but then what do you do to kind of get that out there and really establish the brand for your career?
Mhm. So establishing the brand, I think that again, your positioning statement is best when you have the opportunity to introduce yourself in sort of a one-way communication loop. So by that I mean, the reason I'm opposed to it being called an elevator pitch is because if I was stuck in an elevator with an individual, I would have a back and forth. It would be, hi, you would introduce yourself quickly and then you would give them the chance to speak. Whereas if I sort of ramble off this 30-second statement about all of my strongest qualifications, that individual isn't going to be given the chance to speak. So the positioning statement is really intended when you are, again, in a group of people and are asked to introduce yourself, or if you made your initial introduction and now someone is asking you more detail about exactly what it is you do. Because again, you're not always, even at a professional networking event, you're not always talking to someone that you're trying to, that right out the gate understands that you're looking for a new job or that you're trying to move your business forward. And so the positioning statement, it's the proper place to utilize that is again in your resume content. It's in a job interview. It's a great statement to make on someone's, if you're following up on a job interview or an application that you have submitted. It's a great comment to leave on their voicemail in terms of, this is Kris McGuigan. I'm the project manager, and I know with my detailed approach and big picture thinking that I'm the right person for this job, et cetera. And then definitely anytime you're in a networking event or an association meeting anywhere that you are asked to stand up and introduce yourself, that's a great place to really hit that brand home. And I would expect if I was in a group meeting with you, let's say that met once a month, and every person each month was asked to stand up and introduce themselves, I would be impressed by you if each time you came and stood and gave the same strong, confident, bold statement. I don't want to hear you say something different every time because your brand should not be changing that frequently, right? So
Yeah.
that creates that consistency for me as the audience member or as a fellow association member to really understand and start to remember what you do so that the next time I'm in a different meeting and someone asks for project managers, I think, wow, I know Kris, she's in my, volunteer group. Let me connect the two of you.
Yeah, that's excuse me. What, so you mentioned inconsistency there for a moment. What are some of the main issues you see with people, the main mistakes that people are making in thinking about career branding?
So, Dave, definitely people, especially job seekers, because it's such a challenging, overwhelming, and often emotional process. You get to that place of feeling you feel right away. You want to get yourself a job because then you can get out of this uncomfortable scenario of having to search for a job. And so individuals then start jumping at anything that they see and kind of wanting to be a chameleon and change themselves into whatever it is, whatever position or need the person that they're speaking to happens to have. And this happens a lot with new business owners starting out as well, right? You're like trying to chase the money. And so someone says that they need a gardener, you tell them you have a lawnmower. And then another person says that you need a pool boy, you're like, oh, I know about chemicals. And you're just jumping all over the place. And that's a very understandable human reaction. However, it can be very detrimental to your career brand because the reality is that through the halo effect, human psychology tells us that if I know, Dave, that you are exceptional at coaching finance individuals, if I have, who are at the early point of their career, if I have another new college grad who happens to be in the area of technology who's really looking for a great coach, I'm likely going to pick up the phone and call you and say, Dave, I know this really isn't your area of expertise, but would you be interested in talking with this person? Because by halo effect, I assume that if you are great and have a demonstrated skill in one area, that same skill set probably lays over into a few other areas. However, if you came to me and said, well, I'm a coach, well, what kind of coach? Well, I coach young people. Oh, okay. I'm not going to remember that. It's not memorable. You didn't do a sufficient job of really clearly and in a compelling way telling me what it is that you do and your value. So I'm likely to go on 2 weeks later and run across some new college grads who are talking about what they want to do with their life. And I don't remember who told me that they were a coach because it wasn't a really, poignant conversation at the time. And so people you really want to focus in, hone in on that specific expertise, and don't be afraid to really showcase that target, because people by nature will assume and make that leap for you. So if they hear about an opportunity that's like what you mentioned you do, but not exactly the same, they will still reach out to you because they're going to remember the very specific thing that you do.
Yeah, you and I have talked about that before, just the fear of kind of, you have to almost, in making that positive statement about what you do or what you focus on, you're kind of excluding or pushing away other things that maybe you are interested in. But it's a scary thing to do, to kind of be really focused in and have it's a focused statement on what you do and what you're good at. How do you help people get over that fear of effectively saying no to certain things that they might be interested in or might think they're good at as well?
Well, first, I think there's a big difference between being interested in something and actually being good at it. So
Sure,
that's a starting
sure.
point. But I think, again, it's oftentimes I try to use examples that they've already experienced or what we have in front of us. So let's say that it's a resume candidate that I'm speaking to over the phone. They have their resume in front of them, and maybe I have a copy in front of me, and I'm saying, okay, so if you want to be a jack of all trades, you want to just kind of be open to anything. If this resume came across my desk and I am hiring for a financial analyst, tell me why I would hire you. And they have a difficult time answering that question. However, if I put a customized, targeted, focused resume in front of them, even sometimes by just changing again what the executive summary says so that it's very clear from the start. And then I say, okay, now tell me, if I am hiring a financial analyst, why I would select you. And they start to see some of those key words, which is a very, very huge concept that we haven't quite touched upon yet. They start to see those keywords that are focused in on a financial analyst position. And now they understand the connection between their experience and background and the position that's needed. So oftentimes I take people away from that fear by demonstrating how detrimental it is to them, sort of giving a real life example of how it's not worked for them in the past.
Yeah, kind of putting them on the spot and helping them think through that. Let's go down the road. You mentioned the keywords and kind of connecting your goals, what you're looking for, with the words that you use and the whether it's in your resume or otherwise.
Yes, absolutely. And so keywords are just critical these days, especially when you look at your written documentation, your written branding materials. When we talk about resumes and LinkedIn, you will not be successful without the use of keywords. And that's because of, with the nature of technology, obviously most searches are being done the way Google does them, right? So in LinkedIn, if you go into your LinkedIn account, that very top line that allows you to search, when recruiters step into LinkedIn and they're looking for a financial, someone in finance and economics, they're going to type the words financial planning, financial documentation. They're going to type commercial banking, whatever it may be that they're looking for, a keyword for the position, the job description they're trying to fill. And then the system is going to search, like Google, is going to search and identify which profiles contain those keywords. So if your profile and your brand is not written to focus on the area that you're going into, making sure that you're leveraging those strong keywords that are relevant, then you're never going to show up in those search results. Similarly, from the resume perspective, resumes nowadays are all being run through applicant tracking systems. That's a huge push in the industry because just literally there's no way that HR departments can handle the tens of thousands of resumes that are coming in every day. So every time you submit an online application, your document is going through an applicant tracking system, a robot, essentially a robot filter, and it's scanning your resume to identify which keywords on your document match with the keywords in the job description. And 75% of those resumes are being kicked out before they're ever seen by a human being. So if you don't have strong keywords in your written branding materials that are associated with the field and the position you're looking for, you're likely not going to be seen by anyone to even have that potential conversation around a position.
Yeah, that's I didn't even, until I think you had talked about that several months ago at something where we worked together. I had no idea that even existed. It makes perfect sense, but I had no idea that people are using technology basically to weed out resumes these days, because we're a small company, so we still hand review those things like
Well,
50 at a
indeed.
time.
Yes. And you and I both know that networking is absolutely the key to getting a job, right?
Sure.
So you're going to avoid all of those systems if you hand your resume to a human and that human is in a in a position to make a hiring decision. However, there is also a balance to your job search strategy should be in online submissions and applying to companies directly. And that's going to require you to go through the ATS systems.
Well, those things will, say you email your resume to someone and you don't know them personally. I mean, you just, for whatever reason, someone sends an email in to either a person or an HR department, or they don't have an online application per se, but you email it in. Is there a way for companies to load those things into that same system?
Absolutely,
Okay.
yes. And what's the challenge for ATS systems is that most of them are unique and specific to the companies. So when they started to come out, it was only like the big companies that had access to them. Now you would find that, 90 to 95% of mid to large size companies are running an ATS system. There is not a standard process across the board. And the way in which you design the filters, that each individual company designs their filters and their the tracking process itself is unique to that organization. So you can't really, as a job seeker, guess which words they're using or whether or not they have a system that will automatically flow your resume through an email or if it will stop at a person first. But you can rest assured that if you are applying for a position, even if I have made my way through networking contacts all the way to the CEO and he's sitting, I'm sitting across from him at the desk and he's checking out my resume, you can rest assured that before I can make it through their HR system to receive a job offer, they're going to put my resume into that online process, because much of it has to do with making sure that they're, accommodating the different laws that are coming around discrimination, et cetera. They need to make sure that it's fair across the board and that everybody is essentially blinded and receives scores based upon their performance in the same way. So even if you make it to the point of a job offer, I've still seen candidates who are asked to submit a resume at the last point. That doesn't mean that if your resume got kicked out of the system, you wouldn't receive that offer, but it will in fact be loaded into the system before you're done with the process.
Interesting. And do they actually are those systems assigning scores at this point to,
Yes.
they have 10 categories and you either meet it, you don't, and you're getting a score, an employability score or something like that?
That's exactly how they work, Dave. So imagine you're looking at, again, we'll take a financial analyst position and it's a job description. So very simply put, the filter is going to be set up, the robot is going to be set up to choose these 10 keywords. And those keywords may be a bachelor's degree or maybe even a master's degree. It's going to be, again, financial modeling, maybe project management, because this individual is going to have to work with a lot of other individuals, financial transactions, funds management, whatever it may be. They're going to decide on those 10 keywords. Those are going to be loaded into the ATS. The ATS goes out to your resume that gets submitted online and it searches for different fields and it enters information into the fields. So some of that has to do with the way that your resume is actually structured as well. For example, I would never recommend you use a table inside of your resume because most ATS systems don't know how to read tabled information. So it will just assume that that's blank. So if I put my greatest accomplishments or most of my skills and expertise into a little table columned format, the system will think that's blank. But I digress. So it's going to search your resume, it's going to scan for information that matches its fields. And if it sees bachelor's, then boom, you get a point there because you match the same, you match the education requirement. And if you have, again, those words, financial planning, controls, commercial finance, it's going to load up. And every time you're matching the keywords, you're receiving another point for that. Then all of those resumes are then, you receive this resulting score based upon how strong your match was. And those that reach the top 10% essentially of the scoring will be sent then through the HR system to be printed out and actually reviewed by an individual. The rest will all remain in the system and you'll receive that automatic response of thank you, but no thank you.
Wow. Yeah. It's amazing how fast things are moving. Now, I just want to make sure that we establish for everyone, and you had kind of hinted at it. I mean, this whole submission process is if you're really going about a job search, a career pursuit in the right way, you are, there's networking, you're trying to develop relationships. That's really the best way to, get a position, right?
Yes. And Dave, I'm glad that you asked that because probably one of the most common debates that I have with job seekers in some of the presentations that I offer, or even over the phone as an individual client, is around, well, I need to, they obsess over making sure their resume is specifically tailored for each and every position that it contains, because there's even systems out there. You can go online and find a system that will tell you which keywords will put you through the ATS system fastest, right? There's a lot of ways to try to game the system, if you will. So I have clients or again audience members who are pushing me about, well, I'm focused every day. I'm spending all this time to make sure that I'm getting through those ATS systems. And while I feel like it's important to understand that the ATS systems exist and have a sense for how it is that they work so that you can be as accommodating as possible, the true focus, your best investment in time is trying to, yes, create a strong network that's going to get you introductions into the right place at the right time. So when individuals, it's very easy for people to start to get caught up in, again, human behavior, because that's something we can control and it's on paper. And quite honestly, I can do it from the safety of my own home in front of my laptop wearing my pajamas, instead of putting my big girl pants on and going out there to a networking meeting, which might be a little bit scary for me. And the reality is you've got to push yourself to do those uncomfortable things, because making human connections and getting your brand out there and building that brand and building your network is by far the best way to get a job, and is going to serve you much more than spending hours trying to game an applicant tracking system.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm glad we came back around to that. It's a very interesting though about the ATS. That's a fascinating concept, and good for everyone to know that exists out there. So at least, no matter what, having the keywords, which is where we kind of started with all this, having the keywords matters for the system, yes, but it matters just as much for the individual who can actually help you get hired.
Yes, and some of that is common sense. Like obviously I want to know that you're familiar with industry jargon and that you understand what type of work that we're going to be doing in this arena. And in some cases, those keywords are very specific. If I have a job where I need you to have a strong understanding of socks, for example, I'm going to need to see that on your resume, because if, it helps me understand right away that you have the level of expertise that I'm looking for.
This may be personal opinion. Do you believe you can overdo the jargon though?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, which is relates to the comment I made earlier around trying to game the system, where people just have like every other word on their resume is a key word. And I say to them, this is not, no one wants to read this. It's impossible to read. I can't even understand what you're going for here. So yes, I think like all things, you need to be strategic. And I think in all resumes, across the board, whatever you do, be intentional. So, there's a lot of debate around how long your resume should be and where you should place keywords and should you have pictures, infographic resume. There's so much out there. At the end of the day, whatever you do, be intentional. There should be a reason that you've made the decision you've made. There should be a reason that I have a one-page resume instead of a three, a reason that I've decided to use a specific keyword in one area and not the other. So as long as you're intentional and you have a good rationale for why you've chosen to do that, then it's great, move forward. But no, you don't want to stack keywords, because that's not going to help you. Again, if you make it through an ATS system, that's great, but it's still going to be seen by a human on the other side.
Yeah, and I also worry about I think sometimes when people try to overdo the jargon or really, pump it full of all that stuff, it almost comes across as they don't understand what's going on in the industry, that they don't really understand the business, because it's like you can tell when someone's compensating.
Yes, and a great way, especially for individuals who are at the early point in their career, and so they don't have a ton of very strong long-term career highlights to really push forward in that executive summary, is oftentimes a good format would be to have a very targeted headline at the top of your resume, then give me one or two sentences about why you're great at your sort of branding. And then oftentimes, even for some of my long-term clients who are very tenured in an organization, then just have key skills or skills and qualifications, and give me a bullet list at the top of that resume of some of those keywords from your industry, again, that are very relevant to your position, whether you be an accountant or whatever that may be, some of those keywords, because now you have those keywords are showcased, but you're not trying to jam them into sentences where they don't make a lot of sense or where, to your point, you're overdoing it. So sometimes just a simple, key skills or expertise listing with, 5 to 10 bullets can be very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have something coming up that I want to make sure we point people to, a webinar that you're doing that relates to a lot of this stuff. So where can people go to find out about that and attend that?
Absolutely. Thanks for bringing that up. So we have a standout resume workshop for young professionals that will be coming up on Wednesday, July 6th. So the session is really focused again on that young professional group. We're going to talk about creating attention-grabbing content, clean formatting, surviving that ATS system we just talked about, avoiding common mistakes. But most of all, the focus is going to really be around turning minimal experience into maximum value. How is it that you frame your resume so that you can stand out among the competition who may have an extra 5 or 10 years in front of you? So the registration website for that is resumesforyoungprofessionals.eventbrite.com, or you can simply go to professionalcourage.com/workshops and you can access the link there.
And professionalcourage.com is your website, right?
That is correct, yes.
So people can find out more about you there as well.
Absolutely. Or certainly check me out on LinkedIn. That's a great place to sort of connect and make sure you have access to some of the top tricks and tips that are coming out from industry professionals that I work with.
Great. So everyone should go there, check that out. Kris, is there anything that I'm missing here? Anything that we didn't cover that we should highlight here at the end for career branding for people trying to work on that, whether they're advancing or trying to make a switch?
I think, Dave, my final comment around the career branding would really be, the definition of branding is to make an impression on somebody. And it's very important that if you're going through that process of targeting your language and identifying your positioning statement and practicing utilization, et cetera, make sure that it's authentic to you, to the point of not overloading too much jargon. You don't want to try so hard to be what someone wants that you've lost who you really are and all of that. So that's why we start with those, questions around what people talk about. What do they say to you? What do you like to be associated with, et cetera? Because there needs to be an authentic base to all of that, an authentic foundation, or it's all going to come across as very contrived and not be effective in the longer term search.
Very good. Great way to end it. And one more time, where can people find out more about you?
www.professionalcourage.com.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Kris. It was definitely helpful if you're trying to articulate your career brand, trying to figure out how exactly to tell people what you do, why you're great, and do it in a way that you can feel confident about it and know that you'll be memorable. So don't forget, check out that webinar with Kris on July 6th. She left you those 2 links you can head over to. I also added it to the show notes, so if you go over to the site, financecareerlaunch.com, find this post, episode 069, you can find the link there as well. Hope you have a great week, and I'll talk to you again soon.